Hey, and welcome back to the training for the Grayscale Gorilla Light Kit Pro, and we're going to talk about the HDRSky object. Now, if you just followed the HDR Baker tutorial, welcome to the HDRSky object. If you haven't, you may want to go watch the HDR Baker, because what that allows you to do is build light rigs that you can then use with this HDRSky object. You can see it's already added to the scene. I kind of recreated our text here and our camera, and there's no lights in the scene. There's just this HDRSky object, which by default kind of does nothing. What you have to do is the first option over here in the HDRSky controls, you have to add an HDR image to the file here. And now you can use any HDRI image that you find, but what I would recommend you do is build your own using the HDR Baker and the light rigs. So check that out. The HDR Sky here, we just need to pick our HDR file, and we just built one, and we named it 3 softbox thing. That's what I named it up there, and we're just going to click OK, and it's going to be added to the scene. Now, if you remember our light rig setup in our previous HDR Baker scene, you can see this is exactly what we have now ready to go in this scene. So we have our blue softbox over here, kind of have this amber softbox over here. We have this kind of nice blue highlight below us, and straight up above, if we look, is our big overhead sky object. And all these items are in the scene and ready to kind of light this object. Now, the difference is we don't have just the traditional light rig in the scene. What we have is an HDR version of our light rig, which means we can't just hit render and expect it to look the same. What we have to do is use global illumination to light the scene with all of this image data. Now, if you just want the lights to come in, you can kind of save your light rig as a project and bring it in. But if you want to use the HDR image this way, or use HDR images that you find online or anything, this is the way to do it. You come into render settings, and in your effects, you want to go to global illumination, turn it on, and by default, I go to IRQMC still image. Now, this could change if you're doing animation, and I'm going to go through some of these other settings in the global illumination tutorial. For now, set it to IRQMC still image, and set your gamma to whatever your monitor gamma is. Now, most people are 2.2. If you're on Windows or you're on Snow Leopard on a Mac, you're 2.2 gamma. If you're on Leopard like I am, you want to go 1.8. Just know whatever your screen gamma is, that's what you want to set that to. Everything else is fine. We're going to leave these at medium, it's a kind of a whatever render time. We're just going to hit render, and we're going to see how this thing looks. And remember, what it's doing is it's using all the brightness data that it captured with our HDR Baker and our scene that we built with all of the light rig, and it's now lighting our text with all of that data. You can see even the reflections are in here. See the reflection line right there? That's from our blue softbox over there. And you can see our kind of amber parts up top. You can even see that our rear kind of highlight back here is even being included in the rig. So let's look at some of the options. You can see obviously there's brightness settings. If we crank up the brightness, you can see that when we hit render again, it's going to go way, way brighter. In fact, while we do all these testing, let's go back into our render settings and reduce our irradiance cache settings to low. If your render settings don't look identical to mine, you may have an older version of Cinema, and you may want to just do a kind of a quick search on global illumination for Cinema 10 or wherever you're on, and understand how your settings work. So they changed a while back. So just in case you're different, that's how it is. So I'm sorry, we set our irradiance cache to low. We're going to come back, and you're going to see it renders much, much quicker. Beautiful. A little too bright. We were trying out our brightness settings, so let's just turn that back down. Brightness multiplier is the same thing. If you really need to crank the brightness, you could turn that up. The blur luminance texture is kind of a tricky thing to understand, but just know that the reason when you use HDR images, what you usually want to do is you want to use a blurred version of the HDR image to light the scene, to actually light all of the objects. And then in the texture, in the actual reflections, these things here, you actually want to use a crystal clear, sharp version of the texture to then get those really nice, sharp reflections. So you can remember we had this nice little reflection line right there. Know that if you blur the luminance texture, you're not going to blur your reflections. You're only going to blur how the image is being lit. And in this case, we're okay because we're not going to see too much of a difference. It's when you start to get floor, like a plane in here and stuff like that. Let's say we had a plane. Let's say we had, you're probably not going to see it here either. We may run into it with the HDRI tutorials we're going to do. But just know if you're getting kind of jumpy or messed up global illumination kind of looking lights, you may want to turn up your blur luminance texture. Just a kind of a quick way to handle that. And then rotation is obvious. It's going to rotate the whole rig around. So if you just wanted to kind of rotate the rig, see what that looked like. I'm going to turn it down again. Still a little bright there. But now you can see we have kind of an amber in the back, and if we rotate it around again, you can see now we have more amber up front, blue in the back, and we can kind of play around with that. Now, seen by camera, we can turn off, and that way everything else looks identical, but the actual kind of rear projection stuff is gone. You can see it still shows up in the reflections, but it's just gone from the camera. And the GI light on is just going to shut the whole thing off, pretty much. If you want to see the reflection, so if we have seen by camera on and we have GI light on, we have that shut off. What we'll have are basically reflections only at this point. So keep that in mind. So anyway, there's the settings. Not too many settings in this one, but this is basically a really kind of quick way to take an HDR image instead of making a sky object and getting it all together, making a blurred version. All these settings make it really easy to take an HDR image that you either made with the HDR Baker with the light rigs, or some of them will be included also. So if you just want to include some of them, you can just use this HDRSky image maker and then import using the HDR files and then light your scene that way. So that's it. Thanks for watching this one, and I hope to see you guys in another tutorial where we talk about every little detail and all the rigs here. So I hope to see you guys there. Thanks, guys. Bye.